The stars glittered brightly in the black void of space, far away from Earth, where no one could hear you scream. The silence was thick and still, like the calm before a storm. For centuries, humanity had explored, expanded, and established itself. Across the stars, space was no longer a frontier to be feared. It was humanity's playground, where the dream of reaching the stars had become a reality. But now, that reality was about to change. Deep in the far reaches of space, beyond the known systems, an alien force was moving closer to human territory. This force was powerful and ancient, driven by intentions that were yet unclear. Their fleet was larger than anything Earth had ever faced down. They were headed straight for human space. The aliens were uninvited, but they were determined to make their presence known. On Earth, high above the planet's surface, the command center of Earth's space defense watched the movement of the fleet with growing concern. As they tracked the alien ships on their monitors, the sense of dread was impossible to ignore. They had never seen anything like this before. The fleet was massive, nearly 3 times the size of any force Earth had ever deployed. And it wasn't just the size of the ships that made them nervous. It was their approach. The aliens weren't sneaking in quietly. They were making a statement. In the command center, the lights flickered as the main screen came to life, displaying the incoming fleet in all its glory. The aliens weren't trying to hide their arrival. They weren't even bothering with subtlety. No, this was an invasion that had no regard for borders, no respect for boundaries. One officer, Lieutenant Harrison, stared at the screen, unable to shake the feeling that something was horribly wrong. He had been on the front lines of numerous conflicts, but nothing about this felt like the skirmishes humanity was used to. The alien fleet was huge, its ships gliding through space with an eerie calmness, as if they knew no one would dare challenge them. There were no warnings, no signs of communication, just ships, large and menacing, advancing without hesitation. Lieutenant Captain Rayner's voice cut through the tension. Any sign of their intentions? Harrison shook his head, his eyes still fixed on the screen. Nothing yet, sir. They've just arrived. They're not sending any messages or signals. It's like they expect us to simply accept their presence. The captain nodded, his brow furrowing. What does that tell you? Harrison's jaw tightened. That they don't care about us. They're not here to negotiate. They don't need to. They're sending a message, and it's not one of diplomacy. The room grew quieter as the staff absorbed the weight of Harrison's words. The aliens didn't need to say anything. Their arrival alone was enough to declare their dominance, and humanity wasn't prepared for that. As the alien ships approached the borders of human space, Earth's defense systems were quickly put into motion. The military mobilized their fleets, preparing for the worst. They activated the deep space warning systems, sending out emergency broadcasts to every corner of human space. The military gathered, but a sense of unease lingered. They had fought battles before, but this felt different. They had never faced an enemy so bold. Send a warning, Captain Rayner ordered. Let them know this is human territory. They cannot just waltz in here uninvited. Harrison typed rapidly into his console, preparing to send the message. Message being sent. It's standard protocol. No one enters human space without permission. Let's see if they respond. The transmission was simple, but powerful. It was a warning, something humanity had sent before. Human space is off. Turn back now, or face the consequences. There was no reply. The silence that followed felt like a punch to the gut. The message had been sent, but the aliens didn't even acknowledge it. The fleet just kept moving forward, closer and closer. Undeterred by the warning, they were crossing into human space, and there was nothing humanity could do to stop them. The aliens didn't care about the warning. They didn't care about anything except their own plans. The atmosphere in the command center grew tense. The officers exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to do next. The fleet of alien ships was still coming. They were now within range of Earth's defense systems, but no one knew if the weapons were even strong enough to stop them. Suddenly, the monitors began to flash, and a low hum filled the room. The radar systems picked up a strange anomaly. A blip appeared on the screen, unidentified, and growing larger by the second. The fleet had stopped, but the movement wasn't random. The aliens were responding. I don't like this, Harrison muttered under his breath, watching the screen with growing unease. Brace yourselves, Captain Rayner commanded, his voice calm but filled with tension. We're about to find out if humanity can stand its ground. The lights dimmed in the command center as the first wave of the alien ships prepared to enter human space fully. They didn't need to say anything. They didn't need to make a speech or even fire a shot. The very fact that they were there, moving closer and closer to Earth, was enough to send a clear message. As the alien fleet drew closer, it became apparent that this was no ordinary invasion. The aliens weren't interested in negotiation. They weren't interested in trade or peace. They were here to send a message. They were in charge. Humanity was nothing compared to the might of their fleet. The message they had sent earlier was met with silence. The aliens weren't just crossing into human space, they were claiming it. And now the question remained, what was humanity willing to do to keep their place in the stars? Would they bend and submit to the alien invaders, or would they fight to protect their home? The clock was ticking, and the answer would come soon enough. The silence of the command center was shattered by a low hum, growing louder with every passing second. The screens flickered as the alien ships continued their advance, now unmistakably within human territory. It wasn't just the proximity of their arrival, it was their sheer confidence. The ships didn't hesitate, didn't falter in their course. They came, and they came fast, like a storm on the horizon, pushing forward with purpose. The message humanity had sent had been ignored, brushed aside as though it were nothing more than a fleeting whisper. Dr. Carter watched, his hand steady on the control panel, but his mind was racing. They had expected a response, a sign that the aliens understood the warning, that they would respect human boundaries. But nothing had come. The alien ships were like shadows, gliding silently through the stars, growing ever larger on the screen. Their presence a stark contrast to the usual humdrum of routine space traffic. Humanity wasn't ready for this. No one had prepared for a confrontation of this magnitude. The fleet was composed of dozens of massive ships, each one a testament to alien power and technology, their sleek designs almost alien in their elegance. They were unlike any ship the humans had ever seen, far more advanced than anything in the human arsenal. They exuded an energy that was palpable even through the monitor screens, a low thrum that seemed to reverberate through the walls of the command center. And they weren't stopping, they weren't retreating, they were just moving forward. On the main screen, the alien flagship emerged, larger than anything else in the fleet. Its surface was a dark, polished material that seemed to absorb the light around it, reflecting nothing but the vast, empty void of space. The ship's outline was sharp, angular, and deadly. Every edge seemed like it could cut through the very fabric of space itself. Dr. Carter couldn't help but feel a chill as he stared at the giant craft. Are they really ignoring us? An officer next to him asked, disbelief in their voice. They're not just ignoring us. Dr. Carter replied, his voice steady but laced with something else, something darker. They're mocking us. They don't think we're a threat. The alien ships came closer, their movements deliberate and unhurried. It was as though they had nothing to fear. In the face of humanity's warning, they showed no signs of hesitation, or even curiosity. They simply moved unbothered, as if they had all the time in the universe to make their point. We're within range. Another officer spoke up, tapping a few keys on the console. Do we open fire? Should we be preparing? The defense systems. Dr. Carter turned his head slowly, his eyes hard. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gazed at the alien ships, weighing his options. They were closing in. The protocols said to engage the defense systems the moment they crossed into human space. But this felt different. He couldn't just go through the motions. This time. Finally, he broke the silence. No, he said, his voice unwavering. Not yet. A few of the officers glanced at him, confused. What do you mean? One asked. They're in our space. We have the right to defend ourselves. I know, Dr. Carter replied, his eyes never leaving the screen. But we need to understand what we're dealing with first. We can't just fire blindly. We have to see their next move. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut through. Every officer stood frozen, unsure of how to proceed. Humanity had always been taught to defend itself, to fight for its place in the stars, but this felt different. These aliens were not like any foe they had faced before. This wasn't just about a space battle, it was about understanding the enemy, understanding the stakes. Then, as if on cue, the alien flagship paused in space, its massive form looming over Earth's boundary like a predator hovering over its prey. The rest of the fleet stopped too, surrounding the flagship like an entourage, the ships glowing faintly in the dark of space. They've stopped, the officer at the communication station said, confusion thick in their tone. They're just waiting. Dr. Carter's heart raced. He had a feeling the aliens weren't waiting to attack. They were waiting to see what humanity would do. It was a psychological game, a test. They wanted to see if humanity would blink first, if they would back down, if they were truly ready for what was to come. We're being tested, Dr. Carter murmured. His voice was soft, but it carried through the room. They want to see if we'll show fear. if we're willing to fight back or if we'll cower. The seconds stretched on, dragging out into what felt like hours. The alien fleet remained, perfectly still, waiting. It was as though the universe itself had stopped moving. Then, as if to punctuate the silence, a sudden burst of energy shot from the flagship, its pulse lighting up the darkness. A single, bright beam shot into space, making contact with Earth's outer atmosphere. It wasn't an attack, no, it was something else. A signal, maybe a message. Humanity had been ignored until now. The aliens wanted to make their point. They were here, they were powerful, and they weren't leaving. Dr. Carter's eyes widened. What are they doing? He asked aloud, unable to tear his gaze away from the screen. Sending a message. The officer at the sensor station replied, "It's not an attack, sir. It's a warning. They've crossed our threshold, and now they're letting us know who's in control." The alien fleet was not just making its entrance. They were declaring ownership of this space. The message was clear. Humanity was no longer the dominant force. These aliens were powerful, and they didn't need to fight to prove it. They had already won without a single shot fired. Dr. Carter stood in silence, his mind racing. The warning had been ignored. Humanity had tried to protect its space, but now, Earth was facing an enemy unlike any it had ever known. And the question that remained was this: would humanity be able to stand its ground? Or had they already lost before the first shot had been fired? As the alien fleet loomed ever closer, the silence in the command center was unbearable. The officers sat frozen, their eyes fixed on the large screen, watching the alien ships position themselves around the outer edge of Earth space. Message was clear. They had crossed the line. The fleet didn't need to fire a single shot to send their message. Their presence alone was a declaration of power. Dr. Carter stood in front of the control panel, staring intently at the shimmering image of the alien flagship. His mind raced, trying to process the sudden shift in the balance of power. The aliens had tested humanity's defenses, and now they were waiting to see what Earth would do next. They had been given every chance to retreat, to turn back, and yet they chose to stay. To press on, to challenge the very boundaries of humanity's existence in the stars. "We can't sit here forever," one of the officers murmured, breaking the tense silence. "We have to do something." Dr. Carter's gaze never wavered from the screen. His fingers twitched over the panel, hesitating before pressing a button to bring up the global communication network. A quiet hum filled the room as the feed began. Transmitting to Earth's leaders, his mind flickered with 1,000 possibilities, each one darker than the last. "We wait," Dr. Carter said quietly, his voice cutting through the murmurs in the room. "We don't attack yet. We need to understand them first." The room was stunned into silence. They had expected action, a counterstrike, something that would show the aliens they weren't welcome. Instead, Dr. Carter was suggesting the unthinkable: patience. But for all their advanced technology and military might, they had no idea what they were up against. The aliens had shown no sign of aggression, just their overwhelming presence. It was a silent war, a psychological battle that had only just begun. "I'm not comfortable waiting," one officer spoke, his voice tight. "They've invaded our space. We should fire first." Dr. Carter turned to face the officer, his expression calm but firm. "They want us to attack. If we react impulsively, we're playing into their hands. We need to show restraint to prove that we are not acting out of fear." The officer, and most of the others in the room, looked unconvinced. But Dr. Carter knew that making the wrong move now could spell disaster for humanity. They were not just facing an alien force, they were facing an alien intelligence, one that was observing every reaction, every move they made. If they were to win this war, they needed to be smarter, more strategic. That suddenly, the massive alien ship on the screen flickered, a series of lights blinked on and off, and a strange, low hum emanated from the vessel. It was as if it was communicating, sending a message, but not in any language Earthlings had ever known. The hum intensified, growing louder, vibrating through the control center. The alien ship's energy field began to glow in a pulsating rhythm like the heartbeat of something ancient and powerful. One of the technicians gasped, "The ship, it's charging something, double quotes." Dr. Carter leaned forward, his pulse quickening. The ship wasn't preparing for a direct attack. It was gathering energy, preparing something more sophisticated, something with greater impact than a simple missile strike. The aliens weren't interested in brute force. They were playing a deeper game. "Get me a translation," Dr. Carter barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. The room shifted into action, officers scrambling to decode the alien signal. The hum grew louder, resonating with a strange power that was almost hypnotic then. It happened. A sharp, blinding pulse of light shot out from the flagship. It wasn't a weapon, not in the way Earthlings understood weapons. This wasn't a blast of energy, it was a beam of pure information. The pulse shot through the darkness of space, crossing vast distances in an instant, but instead of impacting anything in the physical realm, it hit something deeper directly into the heart of the Earth's communications network. The room fell into stunned silence. Dr. Carter's heart skipped a beat. The aliens weren't just attacking humanity physically, they were hacking into their systems. A signal, something coded and encrypted, was now in their grasp. The pulse wasn't a weapon, it was a form of communication, a breach of Earth's most secure systems. The alien fleet wasn't here just to conquer. They were here to take, sir. It's an offer, one of the officers stammered, eyes wide with disbelief. They're trying to communicate with us. They want us to listen. Dr. Carter's mind whirled. An offer? What kind of offer could they possibly make? The fleet was too vast, the threat too great for this to be anything but a trap. A second pulse of light emanated from the alien flagship, this time even brighter, a flash that seemed to overwhelm all the systems in the room. But this time, it was accompanied by a clear message that reverberated through the speakers of the command center, though it was in no language they could understand. Translate it, Dr. Carter said, his voice sharp. The officers worked furiously, pulling up translation software and deciphering the alien language. What they received was not what they expected. It's a request, one officer said, bewildered. They want a meeting, a face-2-face, ... diplomatic meeting. Dr. Carter froze. The aliens who had crossed into human space without warning, who had shown no mercy, were asking for a meeting. The arrogance, the audacity of it. They want us to negotiate. Dr. Carter whispered to himself. They don't care about us. One of the officers replied bitterly. They think they can do whatever they want. They think we'll bow to them, Dr. Carter said softly, but they don't understand humanity. They think they can intimidate us into submission. Dr. Carter's jaw tightened. He had seen power before, but never like this. Never an enemy so confident, so sure of their dominance. The aliens weren't just making a move, they were setting a trap, offering humanity a chance to step into their territory on their terms. They were testing Earth's willingness to comply. The next move was critical. Dr. Carter knew that making the wrong decision could lead to the end of humanity's autonomy in space, a future where Earth would become nothing more than a pawn in a much larger game. But was he ready to play their game? Could humanity survive an alien intelligence that had no need for diplomacy, no need for negotiation? Dr. Carter turned to face his team, the weight of their next decision hanging heavily on his shoulders. He wasn't sure if they were ready for what was coming, but one thing was certain. This was only the beginning. The hum of the command center was deafening in its silence, broken only by the rapid clacking of fingers against keyboards. Dr. Carter's eyes never left the screen, where the alien fleet continued to hover at the edge of human space. Their presence, once intimidating, now seemed almost mocking. They weren't just here to invade, they were here to test humanity, to gauge how far Earth was willing to go to protect its place in the stars. The offer had been made, but Dr. Carter wasn't ready to trust it. Something didn't feel right. The communication from the aliens had been clear. A meeting, a negotiation, a chance for diplomacy. But there was something beneath the surface, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. The arrogance in their request was almost palpable. They had crossed into human space without warning, without permission, and now, they wanted humanity to sit down and discuss terms. It was like a predator asking its prey to come closer for the kill. There was no way they would back down without testing humanity's resolve first. Dr. Carter's fingers tightened around the edge of the console. Prepare the fleet, he said, his voice calm but filled with an edge of steel. We're not giving up our space without a fight. The officers in the room exchanged uncertain glances, but no one spoke. The decision had been made. They would not back down. Humanity's place in the universe was at stake. But as the officers worked to mobilize the fleet, Dr. Carter felt a gnawing doubt deep in his chest. What if the aliens were more than just a powerful force? What if they were playing a much deeper game, one that humanity wasn't ready for? His mind flashed back to the first wave of the alien fleet's arrival, the eerie silence that had followed their advance. They hadn't attacked, not immediately. Instead, they had tested humanity's response. The warning, the pulse of energy, the strange communication, it was as though they were studying them, learning how Earth would react under pressure. And now, with the fleet mobilizing, it felt like the aliens were waiting for something more. They're still waiting, one of the technicians muttered, voice tinged with disbelief. No sign of movement. They're just watching. Dr. Carter stared at the screen. The fleet was positioned just outside the range of Earth's defensive systems, but they hadn't made any move to attack. They were playing with humanity, testing the waters, seeing how far they could push without starting a full-scale war. It was infuriating. I don't like this. One of the officers finally spoke, breaking the tense silence. They've made their move. We should strike first. Show them we're not afraid. Dr. Carter turned to face him, his eyes sharp. We can't afford to strike blindly. We don't know their full capabilities. For all we know, this is just the first part of a larger strategy. If we act recklessly, we could provoke them into something we're not prepared for. The officer seemed taken aback, but Dr. Carter wasn't finished. We wait. We stay on the defensive. Let them make the next move. We need to learn their tactics, their weaknesses. He was met with silence. It wasn't what anyone wanted to hear. The officers in the room were all trained for combat, for action. They had been taught that when faced with a threat, you strike first, take control, but Dr. Carter knew better. This wasn't a simple battle, it was a war of minds, of strategy. And in a war like this, hesitation could be just as deadly as a poorly aimed missile. The tension in the room grew thicker as the minutes stretched on. Dr. Carter's thoughts raced as he stared at the alien fleet, still hovering just outside human space. Each passing second felt like an eternity. The aliens hadn't moved, hadn't given any indication of their intentions. But Dr. Carter wasn't fooled. They were waiting for something, waiting for humanity to show its hand. And he wasn't about to give them that satisfaction. He walked over to the central console, scanning the readings. The fleet was still intact. No signs of retreat or additional reinforcements. The aliens had shown their strength by crossing into human space, but now they were testing the waters. What would humanity do next? Would they respond with fear or with defiance? Send a message, Dr. Carter ordered suddenly. Let them know we're prepared. The officer at the communications station hesitated, but quickly began inputting the message. Dr. Carter watched as the transmission was sent to the alien fleet. The message was clear, simple, and direct. Human space is our home. You are not welcome here. Leave now, or face the consequences. He didn't care if they would respond. The message wasn't for the aliens. It was for Earth. It was a declaration to humanity that they would not back down. They would fight for their home, for their place in the stars. Message sent, the officer reported, his voice tight. Dr. Carter nodded. Now we wait. The minutes dragged on, each one stretching longer than the last. The fleet was still, stationary, silent. The air in the command center felt thick, heavy with anticipation. The officers shifted nervously, their fingers hovering over their consoles, ready to react at a moment's notice. But no one moved, no one spoke. They were all waiting for the same thing. Then, just as the tension seemed unbearable, the alien flagship flickered to life again. Its immense form glowed brightly against the darkness of space. The beam of energy from earlier fired once more, but this time, it wasn't just a pulse. It was a wave, an overwhelming force that washed over the entire command center, rattling the walls and sending a jolt through every officer in the room. The room erupted in chaos. What was that? One officer yelled, as the monitors blinked in and out of focus. Dr. Carter's pulse quickened as the readings from Earth's defensive systems flickered. The alien ships had just sent a signal, an unmistakable one. This wasn't just a communication. This was a challenge. The aliens were not waiting anymore. They were preparing for war. Get the fleet into position, Dr. Carter commanded, his voice sharp and unwavering. It's time to show them who we are. Humanity's patience had run out. The first strike had been made. The war for human space had officially begun. The crackling energy that had swept across the command center slowly began to fade, leaving behind a haunting silence. Dr. Carter stood at the center of the room, his gaze fixed on the screen, where the alien fleet hovered just beyond Earth's protective boundaries. A wave of energy had been a message, clear and concise, but now it was time to respond. The line had been crossed, and there was no turning back. The alien ships had moved first, sending a pulse of energy meant to rattle human defenses, to show the power they wielded without even trying. But now, Dr. Carter could feel the pressure building. The first shot had been fired, not physically, but strategically. Humanity had been tested, and it was their turn to decide whether to fight or back down. But the choice was clear to him now. Humanity could not afford to retreat. Activate the fleet, Dr. Carter said quietly, his voice commanding but tinged with urgency. He turned to the operations table where the warship Zeus stood at the center of the strategic formations. This was no longer just about defending Earth, it was about proving that humanity would not be intimidated. The aliens had underestimated them, and that was their fatal mistake. The officers and engineers, once hesitant, moved with renewed purpose. Commands were issued, systems powered up. Dr. Carter watched as the massive human ships aligned in formation, their engines igniting one by one. Zeus, Earth's greatest weapon, was ready to launch. But even with the full might of humanity's fleet now in motion, Dr. Carter couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle hadn't even begun yet. As the human ships gathered in a tight formation, heading toward the alien fleet, the once calm and silent space around them became charged with anticipation. Every ship, every human soldier, every officer aboard their vessels knew what was at stake. This wasn't just a fight for control of space, it was a fight for their very survival. The alien fleet, unmoved, remained in place, the ships shimmering ominously in the distance. Their silence was their greatest weapon. They had been waiting for humanity to respond, testing them, learning about their weaknesses, and now that the fleet was moving in, they could feel the tension escalate. Dr. Carter knew the aliens weren't underestimating humanity anymore. This was their real test. Enemy fleet locking weapons, the communications officer called out from the console, voice steady despite the growing intensity. They're preparing for engagement. All ships, brace for impact. Dr. Carter's eyes narrowed as he watched the alien ships. The massive vessels were deceptively quiet, almost as if they had been waiting for this exact moment. Suddenly, without warning, the alien ships fired. The energy blasts erupted from their forward cannons, streaking toward the human fleet with deadly speed. Brace for impact, Dr. Carter shouted. But humanity wasn't caught off guard. Zeus fired back almost immediately, its massive guns releasing a powerful beam of concentrated energy that collided with the alien barrage. The two forces met in a violent explosion of light and sound, shaking the fabric of space itself. The blast from Zeus's weapons sent shockwaves through the battlefield, but the alien ships held their ground, their shields absorbing the brunt of the attack. Despite their formidable strength, the alien ships couldn't escape the wrath of humanity's greatest creation. As the human fleet began to return fire, each shot carrying the weight of Earth's hope, the alien ships began to falter. The first vessel took a direct hit, its shield flickering before finally failing. The blast sent the ship spiraling into space, its once imposing silhouette now a burning wreck. Dr. Carter's eyes widened as he watched. "We've got them on the run," he whispered. But there was no time to celebrate. The alien fleet wasn't retreating, they were adapting, and they had only just begun to show their true strength. From the wreckage of their fallen ship, the alien forces seemed to regroup. They weren't retreating. They were reorganizing, coordinating their movements with terrifying precision. In response, the human fleet spread out, taking on a more fluid defensive formation. The warships of Earth moved like a well-oiled machine, their weapons firing in perfect unison, every shot calculated and deliberate. But the aliens were no longer just a force, they were a force to be reckoned with. With a sudden surge of energy, the remaining ships of the alien fleet regrouped and charged forward in a coordinated attack. This was no longer just about brute force. It was a test of tactics, a game of survival, and the aliens were playing. To win, prepare to counterattack, Dr. Carter shouted, his voice fierce and unwavering. The human fleet, though outnumbered, responded with a decisive, well-timed strike. Zeus led the charge, its weapons firing in rapid succession, tearing through the alien ranks, but the battle was far from over. As more ships fell, others took their place. The alien fleet seemed endless, an unstoppable force that could absorb every loss, every blow, without missing a beat. The human fleet, on the other hand, was more vulnerable, with every ship now facing the strain of continuous battle. "We need to hit them harder," shouted one of the commanders from across the room. Dr. Carter nodded grimly. He knew it wasn't enough to just fight back. Humanity had to show that they were willing to do whatever it took to win. "Prepare for the final strike," he said, voice cold with determination. "We won't stop until they know humanity's strength." The final wave of the alien fleet surged forward, their weapons firing in a devastating barrage. But this time, the human fleet was ready. With a single command, Zeus unleashed its most powerful weapon, a concentrated energy pulse that blasted through the alien formation, tearing through their shields like paper. One by one, alien ships exploded in a blaze of fire, their once perfect formations now scattered in the wake of humanity's might. The energy pulse from Zeus cut through the chaos, leaving destruction in its path. The alien fleet, now broken and disarrayed, began to retreat. Unable to keep up with the sheer force of humanity's resolve, Dr. Carter watched the alien ships, retreating into the darkness, their once menacing presence fading into nothing. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Humanity had shown them that they were not to be underestimated, that Earth's place in the stars would not be so easily taken. The alien fleet was retreating, but the message was clear. Earth had no intention of backing down. The next phase of the war had begun, and humanity, for the first time in history, had sent a clear message across the galaxy. This was human space, and no one entered uninvited. The alien fleet, now fractured and retreating into the depths of space, left behind a battlefield littered with the remains of their once mighty warships. Yet, despite the victory, Dr. Carter couldn't shake the feeling that the real war had just begun. The retreat was nothing more than a pause, a brief moment of respite before the next wave of the unknown alien forces arrived. The first battle had been won, but Earth's future was still uncertain. The flickering screens in the command center showed the aftermath of the fight, and though the immediate threat had been dealt with, humanity's victory felt incomplete. Each alien ship that had fallen was a small victory, but it was the retreating fleet, the ones still out there, hidden beyond the edge of the galaxy, that haunted Dr. Carter's thoughts. The aliens weren't defeated, they were regrouping. Stated. Report, Dr. Carter ordered, his voice steady but filled with a hint of urgency. The officer at the communications desk glanced nervously at the readout. The alien fleet has withdrawn, but they're not gone, sir. We've detected increased energy readings beyond the outer reaches of our space. It looks like they're assembling, gathering their strength for another strike. This isn't over. Dr. Carter closed his eyes for a moment, taking in the weight of the situation. The Earth had never faced a threat like this before, and it wasn't just about military power. The aliens had demonstrated something far more dangerous than raw strength. They were strategic, calculated, and able to adapt. This wasn't a battle of brute force, it was a war of wits. Then we'll prepare, Dr. Carter said, his resolve hardening. We need to understand them, to get ahead of them before they regroup and strike again. The crew moved quickly, issuing commands to gather intel, reanalyzing the battlefield. Humanity had just faced the first wave of this alien threat, and there was no time for complacency. The message from the aliens was clear. They weren't just here to test humanity's defenses. They had come to dominate, to take what they believed was rightfully theirs. They had shown no mercy, and Dr. Carter knew they wouldn't show any in the future. As the crew worked, Dr. Carter stood, staring at the holographic map of Earth's space. His thoughts raced. How could humanity fight a foe who seemed so relentless? The alien ships had no hesitation in crossing human space, and their ability to regroup was unlike anything humanity had faced before. This wasn't just was a systematic, planned assault. The officer at the radar station suddenly spoke up. We've intercepted another signal from the aliens. It's not an attack, it's a transmission. Dr. Carter's brow furrowed. What kind of transmission? It's encrypted, sir, but it's coming directly from the flagship. It's a message. It seems personal. A chill ran down Dr. Carter's spine. What could the aliens possibly want to communicate? They had already proven that they could overwhelm Earth's defenses, and now they were reaching out again. What was left to say? Decode it, Dr. Carter ordered, his mind running through a dozen possible scenarios. This wasn't just an attack anymore. This was a message, and he had to understand it. The room fell into tense silence as the technicians worked to crack the code. The minutes felt like hours. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the transmission was decoded. The screen flashed to life, showing an alien symbol, its meaning still a mystery. But beneath it, words began to form, translated into English. Though the message was chilling, humanity is strong, but no one is stronger than the collective. You have shown power, but you are not the only species to claim dominance. Come, face us again, and we will see if your strength is enough. The challenge is yours. Will you meet it? Dr. Carter's heart pounded. It wasn't a threat, it was a challenge. The aliens were daring humanity to fight again, to see if they had what it took to survive. They weren't simply interested in defeating Earth. They wanted to test the limits of humanity's resolve, to push them to the brink and see how they reacted. It wasn't just a war of weapons, it was a war of pride, of honor. The aliens wanted to break humanity, to show them that their strength meant nothing in the grand scheme of the universe. The challenge hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Dr. Carter's mind was racing. How could they possibly win against an enemy that could so easily adapt, that could regroup and grow stronger after every battle? They had barely survived the first wave. What would happen if another, more powerful force came through? Were they truly ready for that kind of fight? He turned to the officers in the room, his gaze fierce. Preparez ills. We're not backing down. The aliens think they can challenge humanity. We'll show them that no one threatens our home and gets away with it. There was no hesitation in the officers' movements. They had seen what Zeus was capable of, and now they knew what was at stake. Humanity's survival wasn't just about winning battles, it was about sending a message of their own. The alien fleet wanted a fight. They would get one. The preparations were swift. Zeus, humanity's most powerful warship, was primed and ready for action. The crew aboard it was now more determined than ever. They weren't just fighting to protect Earth, they were fighting for their place in the universe. The aliens had shown their hand, and now it was time for humanity to show theirs. As the fleet powered up, ready to face whatever the aliens had in store, Dr. Carter's thoughts drifted back to the message. It wasn't just a challenge, it was a test. The aliens were trying to break humanity's spirit, to see if they could be driven to surrender. But Dr. Carter wasn't about to let that happen. If the aliens wanted to face humanity, they would get more than they bargained for. The countdown began. Humanity was ready. The war was no longer just about survival, it was about proving that no one, not even the most powerful alien force in the galaxy, could break them. Dr. Carter stood tall, his eyes fixed on the screen, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was only the beginning. The countdown echoed in Dr. Carter's mind as he stood at the helm, watching the fleet of human warships prepare for their next encounter. The alien message had ignited a fire inside him, but it wasn't just his resolve that burned there. It was something deeper, something primal. The aliens had issued their challenge, but it was more than just a question of power now. It was a test of humanity's will. Could they truly stand their ground against a force that had already shown its capacity for destruction? Could they, in the face of all odds, prove that they belonged among the stars? Everything's ready, sir, the officer at the communications console said, his voice tight with tension. The fleet is in position. Zeus is ready to lead the charge. Dr. Carter nodded without turning to face him. His eyes were locked on the alien ships, now regrouping in the distance. The once immense fleet that had looked so formidable was now scattered, its components barely hanging together. But even now, Dr. Carter knew the alien forces weren't beaten. They were regrouping, planning, waiting for the next move. They think they can break us, Dr. Carter murmured, his fingers running over the control panel. But they've underestimated humanity's resolve. The officer gave him a questioning glance but said nothing, knowing full well that Dr. Carter wasn't speaking to him. His mind was already elsewhere, preparing for the next phase of this unrelenting war. The alien fleet had shown their hand, but it was time for Earth to do the same. Across the battlefield, the alien flagship lingered, almost taunting in its stillness. The ship was larger than any human vessel, a looming dark shape that radiated an eerie presence. Dr. Carter knew that it was no ordinary ship, it was the heart of their fleet, the command center that controlled everything. It was the one that needed to fall, but the question remained, how? How could humanity, with all its ingenuity and desperation, hope to defeat a force that had already shown its ability to adapt, to regenerate, to evolve? He turned to face his crew, his voice steady. We're not just fighting for Earth, we're fighting for every colony, every station, every human life that has ever set foot in space. This is our home, and we're not backing down. The room fell silent as the officers and crew absorbed his words. Each of them had felt the weight of this war, the pressure of defending their world, their people, and their future. The task ahead of them wasn't just about military strategy. It was about survival, about proving that humanity could withstand whatever the universe threw at them. The hum of Zeus's engines filled the room as the warship's systems powered up. Dr. Carter turned back to the screen, his eyes narrowing. The alien ships were starting to move again, gathering in formation, preparing for their next strike. But this time, humanity wasn't going to sit back and wait. This time, the fight was on their terms. Zeus, prepare to engage, Dr. Carter ordered. We've got one shot at this. The human fleet moved forward, its ships forming a tight, unyielding formation. The light from the alien fleet's weapons flickered on the horizon, their energy shields glowing as they began to charge. It was a devastating show of power, but this time, humanity was ready. Zeus fired first, its powerful beam cutting through the darkness of space. The first alien ship exploded in a burst of light, but the others didn't hesitate. They fought back with everything they had, launching waves of energy in retaliation. Dr. Carter's hands gripped the control panel as he watched the screens. flash with incoming data. Each shot from the alien fleet was a test, each explosion a reminder of how much humanity had at stake. Yet, despite the overwhelming force of the alien weapons, Zeus and the human fleet held their ground. They didn't retreat. They didn't falter. They fought back with everything they had. The battle intensified as the alien ships closed in, their weapons charging faster than ever. The lights from their guns lit up the vast expanse of space, creating a chaotic, almost surreal picture of warfare. Humanity was fighting for its life. And yet, in the midst of it all, Dr. Carter couldn't help but feel a strange sense of determination. They had already faced the impossible and survived. They had already shown that they were not just survivors, they were warriors. We're pushing them back. The officer at the tactical station reported, his voice a mixture of disbelief and hope. The alien ships are beginning to retreat. Dr. Carter's heart skipped a beat. The retreat wasn't final, not yet, but it was a sign. A crack had formed in the alien armor. For the first time it felt like humanity had the upper hand. The alien fleet, which had once seemed invincible, was faltering, and now, with one final push, Dr. Carter knew that they could end this. They could make the aliens understand that Earth was not a place to be taken, not a place to be controlled. Full charge, Dr. Carter commanded, his voice firm. Let's finish this. Zeus unleashed its most devastating weapon, its core releasing a wave of energy so intense that it temporarily blinded the control room screens. The pulse shot across space, slamming into the alien flagship with a force that seemed to shake the very fabric of the universe. The flagship's shields flickered, their energy flickering as the impact sent shockwaves throughout the fleet. And then, for the briefest of moments, everything was still. The flagship, once impenetrable, cracked. The shields failed. The warship that had led the alien assault was now vulnerable, its massive form breaking apart under the strain. Dr. Carter could hardly believe what he was seeing. The alien fleet, once so powerful, was collapsing, their once mighty flagship now reduced to a floating wreck. But even in this moment of victory, Dr. Carter knew the fight was far from over. This was only the beginning. The retreating ships would regroup, and the alien forces would return, stronger and more determined than ever. The war was not over, but for the first time in this battle, humanity had a glimpse of what they could achieve. Zeus fired again, a second shot ripping through the debris, obliterating the remaining alien forces. One by one, the ships fell, their lights flickering out like dying stars. The command center erupted into cheers, but Dr. Carter's gaze never left the screen. They had won this round, but the cost was clear. This was just the beginning. The battle for Earth was over for now, but Dr. Carter knew that in this war, there could be no resting. The aliens had learned something today, just as humanity had, and next time, the stakes would be even higher. Humanity had shown its strength, its resilience, but the war was not yet won. And in the silence that followed, Dr. Carter knew that the true test of Earth's spirit had only just begun.